Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. Today we have a manga review of chapter 894, 12:05 AM. And this week was a really unique chapter because it was more of a montage than anything, which I think was a very good move because last week was pretty stationary and didn't accomplish a whole lot in terms of moving the story forward, although it was pretty awesome in its own right. But in stark contrast, this week we are moving along quite rapidly and cover just under 2 hours in a single chapter. And furthermore, we managed to catch up with all of our major groups in Totland except for the Germa. First up, as if we didn't get enough of me talking about this last week, Luffy vs Katakuri is the main thread of the chapter, and we constantly cut back to the progression of the fight in the mirror world. And actually, I didn't catch this during my first read-through, but there is a fantastic moment in this chapter where Katakuri displays his own version of Red Hawk, which he calls grilled mochi. I thought this was a really nice touch, and the panel of him growing his arm back was just plain awesome. I will never get tired of watching this guy fight. And the fight itself is every bit as brutal as ever, featuring Luffy getting smacked down over and over again, except it does feel a little different to before. I don't know if this is just me becoming numb to Katakuri beating the hell out of Luffy, but it feels like a lot of these hits aren't quite having the same impact as they were. They look fantastic. Honestly, Oda's art in this chapter is on point. But despite that, Luffy feels pretty immune to all of the damage he should be taking. As I said, this might just be because we've seen him get beat up over and over again, but I'm going to give Oda the benefit of the doubt here and say that this feeling is intentional. From the very start of the chapter, there's kind of an aura that Luffy isn't the same fighter as he was before. There's even a very clear panel that shows Luffy using observation haki, likely on a level that he has never experienced before. And I guess before we move on, we should actually talk about the beginning of the chapter. We have a cold opening into a flashback of Luffy and Rayleigh training on Rusukaina, and it's a surprisingly meaningful segment. Rayleigh basically trains Luffy by saying he can't eat until he dodges 100 attacks while blindfolded. And this seems like a pretty funny gag at first, but Luffy ends up having a very cool moment where he refuses food brought to him by his new animal friends. And this is one of those things that tells us just how important Luffy's dream is to him, because other than that, there's really only one reason why Luffy would starve himself, and that is for his crewmates. I definitely do not think it is a coincidence that this flashback has been placed in an arc where Luffy purposely starved himself while waiting for Sanji to return. These two moments combined make me look at Luffy in a much more mature light. He really has come such a long way from the very beginning of the series, with his mental strength matching or even surpassing his physical strength in terms of growth. And at the end of the chapter, we have the result of this growth as Luffy confidently staggers upright and claims that he is going to end this fight. And I don't doubt that. I think that Luffy has gotten what he needed out of this battle, and he now has the experience and ability to face Katakuri. And of course, the big cliffhanger is him once again going into Gear 4th, but announcing a new form, Snake Man. And I really cannot wait to see what kind of crazy form this ends up being, but I am glad that Luffy isn't straight up getting a power-up. I mean, I've been as guilty as anyone in speculating that he may need to awaken his devil fruit to beat Katakuri, but I much prefer the idea of him stepping sideways, so to speak, and using something that he is already physically capable of. I just find that to be a much more satisfying outcome than straight up powering up and becoming ambiguously stronger. Other than dramatic story reasons, I suspect that the reason why we haven't seen Snake Man before now is that it probably focuses on increasing speed and precision attacks, much like a snake. And up until now, Luffy has really only needed to increase his strength against opponents. However, if Luffy were to increase his base speed and combine that with heightened observation haki, then he should be entirely capable of dodging Katakuri altogether. Then of course the only worry is how Luffy will summon enough power to take him down. But we did see in this chapter that Luffy hitting Katakuri in the face with plain old armament haki was fairly effective actually, so maybe there's nothing to worry about. Either way, I could not be more excited to see what this new form brings us. So moving on, I have some bad news for anyone who didn't like the idea of new Charlotte siblings being introduced this late in the arc, because we get an absolute ton of them in this chapter. Too many for even me to keep up with actually. I have to keep referencing the chapter just to get my thoughts straight. But most prominently and unexpectedly, Charlotte Snack has decided to show himself in the series, and this small panel has me unreasonably hyped. Given Big Mom's record with children who fail her, I'd been assuming that she'd just killed Snack for his defeat at the hands of Arouge. However, she does appear to have been merciful, and although Snack has clearly lost his title, we essentially now have another sweet commander to deal with. And even though it's really just a glimpse, I am loving his furry dumpling design. Although I do think that the scarf around the face is a bit of a Katakuri ripoff. Snack's bounty was also revealed to be 600 million berries on the dot, which is a tad smaller than I would have expected actually. Even though I put no real stake in bounties, in fact I've made a whole video detailing how pointless I think they are, I still feel like 600 million might be a bit too weak to be a Yonko commander. It's really only a small step up from the worst generation level. To me, Cracker's bounty is much more of a baseline level of what a Yonko commander should be worth at the very least. But then again, Sabo's bounty is only 602 million, and he's surely worth a whole lot more than that. But it also kind of dampens the hype around Arouge, who seemed like such a beast when we heard that he'd beaten a sweet commander. Now, as it turns out, he's only beaten someone worth 600 million. Meanwhile, Luffy KO'd Cracker, who was worth 860 million, and is now taking on Katakuri, who is worth over 1 billion. But that's okay though, because I'm sure that my man Arouge is going to get his time to shine eventually. Anyway, I'm getting very off track. We were talking about the new Charlotte siblings, and unfortunately for the rest of them, they don't really make much of an impression on me like Snack did. Actually, on closer inspection, there's a really cool looking female swordsman with the number 100 on her shirt, but she's not properly introduced. However, she is still super cool because she looks like she is a member of the Long Arm tribe. And I've not really thought about this until now, but when you think about it, the Long Arm tribe's people are really born to be sword wielders. The extra joint in their arms would allow for some very dynamic movement, and the extra reach is surely an advantage against most human opponents. So I'm definitely hoping we see a bit more of her. The other Charlotte siblings in that wide panel look pretty alright as well, but that's really the most I can say about them without seeing them properly. All in all, this is an absurdly sizable force that has gathered on Cacao Island, so much so that it's looking a lot like the wedding ceremony all over again, where the allied forces were entirely outmatched. There is no way that the crew on the Sunny can beat all of these guys alone. In fact, even with the help of the Germa Kingdom, I'm not so sure it's possible. Which makes me think that the Straw Hats are either going to just grab Luffy and continue running once his fight is over, or maybe even the Big Mom Pirates will just let the Straw Hats go. But why? That is an absurd idea. Well, there are a couple of reasons that make me think that outcome might be possible. Firstly, because Katakuri seems to have taken a real shining to Luffy, so regardless of the outcome of their fight, Katakuri might give the order to let them go, out of sheer respect for his opponent. And should Katakuri get flung out of the mirror world in a state of unconsciousness, the shock and fear of his defeat might halt all of the Big Mom Pirates in their tracks, to the point where they just let Luffy walk on out of there. And there are some other options as well, like Big Mom eating the cake, becoming satisfied, and ordering her crew through Perospero to just let them go as a reward for sheer deliciousness. Basically, I just don't see the Straw Hats winning in a direct confrontation, so I'm trying to think more left field. We should also discuss Charlotte Smoothie though, and I am very proud of her because this sweet commander has finally kicked into gear and done something. In the pursuit of the Straw Hat, she has grown to pretty much giant size and seems to be able to create shockwave slashes in the same manner that giants are capable of. There was one suggestion on the Oro Jackson forums, I think, that proposed Smoothie might have some sort of sponge-type devil fruit, whereby she is able to grow exponentially by absorbing water, and as a result she is also able to squeeze other people and things like a sponge to make tasty cocktails. And I do quite like that theory, but the idea of her absorbing seawater as a devil fruit user does kind of bother me, because in theory that should cancel out her power entirely. So if this is indeed correct, I imagine she would be absorbing some other form of liquid. Who knows though, I'm just glad she's finally doing something. Finally, a few miscellaneous details. I also missed this during my first read, but Carrot is up and running again after her nap time. I don't know how the Sulong form works, but presumably the full moon is still up, so Carrot might just be able to engage in that once more during the upcoming conflict on Cacao Island. And I'm not going to go into any depth about it, but I love Sanji's line where he proudly claims that he will save his captain. I know that the Sanji we all know and love has been back for some time now, but it's great to hear him use the word captain. Oh, and one more random thing, I really like that at every point we got a time update during this chapter, we saw a different clock. The last one is my personal favourite because it's a clock being reflected into the mirror world, which is just a beautiful touch of artistry. But I think that pretty much does it for chapter 894. I absolutely loved it and I cannot wait for next week. If you enjoyed this video, then feel free to like, favourite or subscribe, and please do comment with your thoughts on the chapter. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.